Tu-ha went to the hospital late in the morning, pressing a hand lightly against her chest. The persistent discomfort had been bothering her for days, and although it was probably nothing serious, the uneasiness refused to fade. An electrocardiogram would at least give her peace of mind, or so she thought. She never imagined the real shock would come from the doctor, not her heart. The moment she stepped into the consultation room, her breath stalled. Sitting behind the desk in a white coat was Lam Chi Hứa, her first love from high school, the boy she had not seen or heard from in 8 long years. Time had changed him, yet not enough. His features were sharper, his posture calmer, and the air around him carried the quiet authority of a professional cardiologist. Still, one glance was enough to drag her straight back into the past. "Lie down and lift your shirt to your collarbone," he said, his tone serious and controlled, as if they were complete strangers. Tu-ha obeyed, her movements stiff. As the electrodes were placed against her skin, fragments of old memories flooded her mind, laughing in empty classrooms, shared earphones, and the abrupt, bitter end of their relationship. Back then, she had been 18, insecure, still growing, and she remembered clearly why she had walked away. Or at least, why she believed she had. She tried to compose herself, secretly feeling a trace of childish satisfaction. This time, she was no longer the awkward teenage girl he could look down on. But when she glanced up, she froze. Lam Chi Hüa's ears were red. He noticed her staring and quickly looked away, focusing intently on the monitor. For reasons she couldn't yet name, her heart beat faster, not from illness, but from the strange realization that the past was far from over. Some reunions come quietly. Others arrive wearing a white coat and listening to your heartbeat. An uncomfortable silence settled in the room, broken only by the soft beeping of the machine. Tu-ha lay still, staring at the ceiling, pretending her heart was calm while everything else inside her was not. 8 years ago, she had walked away with humiliation burning in her chest, convinced she had been laughed at, diminished, remembered as not enough. Small, that word had followed her for years. Now, lying here beneath a bright examination light, she felt a dangerous impulse rise. If this encounter was fate, then fate had an odd sense of humor, and perhaps, a chance for revenge. Slowly, deliberately, she adjusted her clothing a little higher than necessary, her movements calm, almost defiant. She waited for a reaction, a flicker of judgment, a trace of that old indifference she remembered so clearly. Instead, Lam Chi Hứa froze. His fingers paused mid-adjustment, the tips of the electrodes hovering for half a second too long before he cleared his throat and continued. The tips of his ears turned red again, this time unmistakably so. Tu-ha nearly laughed. Wasn't he a cardiologist? A doctor who looked at countless bodies every day? Then why did he look like a boy caught glancing where he shouldn't? She sat up once the test ended, meeting his eyes with a faint, satisfied smile. "Is something wrong, Dr. Lam?" she asked lightly. He avoided her gaze and picked up the ECG printout, studying it with excessive seriousness. His brows knitted together, though she wasn't sure if it was due to her results, or the presence of her. 3 quiet minutes passed. Finally, he spoke, voice steady but noticeably lower than before. "There's a slight irregularity in your heartbeat. The short-term test isn't enough. You'll need extended monitoring." Professional. Calm. Distant. Yet when she reached out to stop him from writing, his hand twitched, warmth rushing back to his ears. Tu-ha watched everything, the restraint, the tension, the control, and suddenly understood something she hadn't expected. Whatever he felt back then, whatever he felt now, Lam Chi Hứa had never been indifferent at all. Tu-ha had expected cold instructions and a quick dismissal. Instead, she found herself watching Lam Chi Hứa hesitate, fingers resting lightly on the prescription pad. "The standard device is worn on the chest," he said at last. "You'd need to keep it attached for 3 days. Her expression darkened instantly. "On my back? All day?" She frowned. inconvenient. He finally looked up, meeting her eyes. Then are you planning to skip the monitoring altogether? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Annoying as it was, he was right. Lam Chi Hua sighed, as if weighing something carefully. After a moment, he reached into a drawer and took out a slim, matte black wrist device. There's another option. It's a research prototype, smaller, lighter. Still accurate. Her eyes lit up. A wrist device? She asked, immediately curious. That's way better. I can lend it to you, he added, then paused. But it's personal equipment. Tuha raised an eyebrow. So? So we'll need to add each other on WeChat, he said, pulling out his phone and turning the screen toward her. A QR code glowed faintly. Otherwise, I can't transfer the data. The logic was flawless. Still, the request felt strangely intimate, far more personal than a medical procedure should be. She scanned the code, friend request sent. The sound was soft, but it echoed loudly in her chest. Lam Chi Hua accepted almost instantly, as if he had been waiting. When he stood and walked around the desk, device in hand, she became acutely aware of his nearness. He gently took her wrist, fastening the band with practiced care. Don't take it off, he said, his voice serious. If anything feels off, it will alert me. Alert him, the words lingered. She nodded, suddenly unsure where to look. For a brief second, their hands remained connected, warmth spreading from his palm to hers before he let go. When she stood to leave, Tuha realized something unsettling. They weren't just patient and doctor anymore. With one small device, and one scan of a QR code, their lives had quietly crossed paths again. The next evening, Tuha arrived at the restaurant a few minutes early and immediately spotted Lam Chi Hua sitting by the window. Soft lights reflected off the glass behind him, outlining his figure in a way that felt almost intentional. He wore a black turtleneck sweater and thin silver-rimmed glasses, simple, restrained, and effortlessly composed. For a moment, she hesitated, then he looked up, met her gaze, and smiled. Something in her chest eased. Dinner unfolded more naturally than either of them had expected. There were no awkward pauses, no forced small talk. They spoke about work, about the city, about trivial frustrations and amusing encounters, carefully avoiding the past, yet never straying too far from it. It felt comfortable in a way that surprised her. You haven't changed much, he said casually while cutting his steak. She raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment or an observation? A fact, he replied. You're still straightforward. She laughed softly. He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. When dessert arrived, a chocolate mousse, Lam Chi Hua quietly slid his portion toward her side of the table. Tuha paused, fingers tightening around her spoon. Back in high school, every time chocolate was served, he had done the same. I'm watching my weight, she said, gently pushing the plate back. One is enough. He thought for a moment, then nodded. I'll have it packed for you later. Just in case. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. At some point, he mentioned an upcoming high school reunion. I'll be there, he said, then added, almost thoughtfully, it'll also be a good time for you to return the device. She agreed without hesitation, then realized she had done so far too easily. As they stood to leave, she became aware of how naturally they walked side by side, neither too close nor too far. There was no lingering tension, just something unspoken, steady, and warm. 8 years had changed them. It had softened the sharp edges, dulled old pride, and taught them restraint. Yet beneath the calm, Tuha could still feel it clearly. Some feelings don't fade with time, they simply learn how to wait. The first alert came late that night. Tuha was halfway through a brutal circuit at the gym, sweat clinging to her skin as she pushed herself past exhaustion. The thin band on her wrist suddenly vibrated, followed by a sharp electronic tone beep. Beep, heart rate abnormal. 180. Seriously, she muttered, barely slowing down. She dismissed the voice prompt with a flick of her finger and kept moving. Pain, she told herself, was just weakness leaving the body. Across the city, Lam Chi Hua stared at his phone in silence. The waveform on the screen spiked violently, numbers flashing red. He checked the timestamp, frowned, then refreshed the feed. Another alert came through moments later. 190. How is she still exercising? He murmured, already reaching for his keys. The second time it happened was 2 days later, louder, persistent, impossible to ignore. Music thundered through the bar, neon lights blurring into streaks of color as Taha laughed with her coworkers. The wristband vibrated again, insistent this time. She ignored it. Her phone didn't dot, it buzzed nonstop in her palm, an unfamiliar number lighting up the screen. Annoyed, she declined the call and slipped the phone back into her bag. 20 minutes later, when she returned to her seat, he was standing there. Lam Chi Hua, water clung to the shoulders of his coat, hair damp from the rain outside, glasses slightly fogged. His eyes locked onto her instantly, dark with something she hadn't seen before. Relief. Worry. Anger. All this noise, he said quietly, voice low but tight, and you couldn't answer your phone? Her heart skipped, this time, not because of the device. You followed me, she asked. I tracked the signal, he admitted without evasion. I added location access. For safety. For your peace of mind, she snapped. He exhaled slowly, as if forcing himself to calm down. Your heart rate doesn't lie, Taha. If something happens to you, he stopped, jaw tightening. I don't care about rules right now, he finished. I just needed to know you were okay. And in that moment, standing under flickering bar lights with alarms still echoing in her wrist, she realized how deeply his concern ran, far beyond professional duty. The argument didn't end at the bar. It followed them outside, into the quiet streets soaked with rain and streetlight reflections. Taha stopped abruptly under a flickering lamp, turning to face him, frustration finally spilling over. You crossed a line, Lam Chi Hua, she said, voice shaking despite herself. Tracking my location without asking? You don't get to decide that for me. He stood opposite her, shoulders tense, hands clenched at his sides. If this were any other patient, I'd do the same. She let out a short laugh. Don't lie. This has nothing to do with medicine. Silence fell between them, heavy, honest. She stepped closer. You left 8 years ago without a word. You don't know what that did to me. And now you show up, worry about my heart, show up at bars, take control like you never left. His gaze softened, something raw flickering beneath his calm exterior. I left because I wasn't strong enough, he said quietly. And because I thought, you deserved more than someone who couldn't even promise a future. Rain began to fall harder. I never stopped thinking about you, he continued. Seeing you again, every alert, every spike, I wasn't scared as a doctor. I was scared as someone who still cares too much. Her anger faltered. She realized then that the distance between them had never really existed, just time, pride, and fear layered too thick. Impulsively, she reached out and grabbed his sleeve. Then stop acting like you don't. The kiss that followed wasn't rushed. It was hesitant at first, almost cautious, as if both were waiting for the other to pull away. But when neither did, years of restraint quietly dissolved. Later that night, in the stillness of his apartment, there were no desperate words or promises. Only warmth, shared breath, and familiarity rediscovered through gentle touches. As dawn crept through the curtains, Taha lay awake against his shoulder, heart steady and calm. For the first time in years, the device on her wrist stayed silent, and so did all the things they no longer had to run from. After that night, Taha disappeared. Not entirely, but in every way that mattered. She replied to messages hours later, sometimes not at all. Phone calls rang out unanswered. The gym receptionist mentioned she had switched to early morning sessions. Even the cafe near her office, where she used to linger after work, fell off her routine. Lam Chi Hua noticed everything. At first, he gave her space. He told himself she needed time, that pushing would only make things worse. But as days passed, the silence grew heavier, more deliberate. The device data was stable. Too stable. Her heart rate stayed within safe limits, her sleep cycle regulated, her daily movement cautious. Clinically perfect, almost unnervingly so. She's controlling everything, he muttered during a late shift, staring at the flat lines on his screen. Including me. When he finally ran into her at the hospital corridor a week later, it felt accidental only on the surface. She froze the moment she saw him. Your follow-up is overdue, he said calmly, professional tone slipping into place like armor. I'm fine, she replied quickly, avoiding his eyes. No symptoms. No alerts. That's not your decision. She bristled. You don't get to decide anything about me anymore. The word anymore lodged itself in his chest. That evening, he sent her one last message. If you don't want to see me as anything else, I'll respect that. But don't pretend nothing happened. The bubble stayed unread. Taha sat alone in her apartment, phone on the table, hands clenched in her lap. Her mind replayed fragments, his touch, his concern, the way he had looked at her as if she was something fragile and irreplaceable. That scared her more than abandonment ever had, because caring meant wait ing. And waiting meant risk. By pulling away, she was protecting herself, or so she told herself. Yet at night, lying awake in the dark, her heart betrayed her resolve, beating unevenly whenever his name surfaced in her thoughts. Distance created tension, not relief. And the space she forced between them only made the past louder, echoing with questions she still wasn't ready to answer. The high school reunion was louder, and more crowded, than Taha had imagined. Laughter filled the private dining hall, overlapping conversations blurring into a familiar chaos. Faces she hadn't seen in years appeared wearing new smiles, softened by time and adulthood. Yet the moment Lam Chi Hua walked in, the room seemed to shift. She saw him before she meant to. He stood near the entrance, posture composed, suit understated. Their eyes met briefly, and she looked away first. Dinner progressed amid toasts and nostalgic teasing. Someone proposed a drinking game, truth from the past. Nostalgia loosened tongues, and stories spilled freely. Halfway through, Noi Nam spoke up. I owe someone an apology, he said suddenly, voice uneven from alcohol. Actually, more than one person. The room quieted. Noi Nam looked straight at Taha. Back in senior year. I told you that Chi Hua said those things about you. About your body. That you weren't attractive enough. Her fingers went cold. I lied, he continued, swallowing hard. I was jealous. Of him. Of how everyone, especially you, looked at him. I didn't expect you two to drift apart because of it. A sharp hush fell over the table. Taha's chest tightened as if all the air had been pulled from the room. Memories rushed back, her anger, her embarrassment, her silence when Lam Chi Hua tried to explain without knowing what he was explaining against. She turned slowly toward him. His expression was stunned, then pained, realization flooding in. Taha, he began. Her ears rang. 8 years of resentment. 8 years of avoidance. All standing on a lie. I never said that, he said hoarsely, standing up. I would never. She believed him now, too late, and yet not. Excusing herself, Taha rushed to the balcony, gripping the railing as tears broke free. Guilt, regret, and longing tangled painfully in her chest. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn around as Lam Chi Hua stopped beside her. Why didn't you ask me back then? He asked quietly. Her voice shook. Because I was afraid you'd confirm it. The truth had arrived, unforgiving, irreversible, and with it, the realization that some distance, once created, costs far more than anyone intends. The night air on the balcony was cool, carrying distant city noise that felt oddly far away. Neither of them spoke at first. The truth hung between them, heavy, undeniable, and quietly reshaping everything they thought they knew. I should have trusted you, Tuha said at last, voice barely above a whisper. I let pride and fear decide for me. And because of that, I walked away without ever asking you the truth. Lam Chi Hua turned to face her fully. I should have chased after you. I thought your silence meant you were done with me. I told myself that respecting your decision was the mature thing to do, but really, I was just afraid of hearing you say you didn't want me anymore. She let out a trembling laugh. We were so young. Trying to act like adults without knowing how. He nodded. And now we're older, yet still making the same mistakes. The honesty between them felt fragile, but real. Taha looked up at him, eyes rimmed red. When you worried about my heart, when you showed up at the bar. I was angry, but I was also scared. Because it meant you still cared. And caring makes you vulnerable. So does leaving everything unsaid, he replied. A long pause followed. I'm sorry, they said at the same time. The tension broke in a breathless laugh that startled them both. Lam Chi Hua reached out, hesitant this time, giving her space to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she wrapped her fingers gently around his wrist, grounding herself. I don't want to lose 8 more years, she said quietly. Not because of misunderstandings. Not because we're afraid. I can't promise perfection, he answered. But I can promise honesty. All of it. She met his gaze, seeing no reservations there. For the first time since their reunion, there was clarity instead of confusion, courage instead of retreat. The past no longer loomed as an unhealed wound, it became a lesson, and standing under the dim balcony lights, they chose the same thing at last, to trust, to speak, and to let what still existed between them finally breathe. They returned to the private room together, not separately. Not awkwardly, together. The moment Taha and Lam Chi Hua stepped inside, the noise dropped a fraction, just enough to be noticeable. Someone let out a low whistle. Someone else stopped mid-sip, eyes widening. Noi Nam coughed loudly, suddenly finding the table fascinating. Taha felt all the nerves she'd carefully tucked away rise again, but before she could retreat, Lam Chi Hua reached for her hand. Warm. Certain. He didn't announce anything. He simply didn't let go. Well, a classmate grinned, breaking the silence. Are we interrupting something? Lam Chi Hua smiled calmly. No. We're interrupting misunderstandings that lasted 8 years. Laughter rippled through the room, easing the tension instantly. Taha took a breath, then added, for the record, I'm dating my cardiologist voluntarily. Correction, he said, adjusting his glasses, deadpan. I resigned as her cardiologist 15 minutes ago. The room exploded. Applause, teasing, exaggerated groans of finally filled the air. Someone demanded a toast. Someone else asked when the wedding was. She rolled her eyes. Let's survive the relationship first. Later, as the night wound down, they stepped outside side by side. The city lights felt softer now, less sharp. How does your heart feel? He asked quietly. She pretended to consider it seriously. Stable. Slight tachycardia when you smile. I'll monitor it closely, he replied, amusement lacing his voice. She bumped his shoulder lightly, laughing. As they walked away, fingers intertwined, Tuha realized something profound. Healing didn't arrive as a dramatic moment. It came through honesty, forgiveness, and choosing each other again, this time with open eyes. Behind them, the past finally settled. Ahead of them, the future waited, warm, imperfect, and entirely theirs.